I'm Alex Hunt from Brainjuicer. I am basically stood in between every single one of you and a cocktail. So I'm going to make this really long, painful, drawn out, lots of questions. We could be out of here by about 8 o'clock if that works for everybody. I'm kidding, by the way. So we have a great panel. I think the idea of this final session is that we've heard from a lot of agencies, and it's really time to hear from some advertisers about communications testing. So our panelists are Edwin from ESPN. He's Director of Insights at ESPN. Everybody can read his bio online, so I won't kind of take you through it. It's a very illustrious bio. But I have asked each of the panelists to tell me an interesting fact about themselves that the audience wouldn't know. So Edwin was actually married on a iceberg in Alaska, and his daughter actually also graduates from kindergarten tomorrow, in fact. So congratulations and a big hand for Edwin. We have Sarah from Green Mountain Coffee Roasters in Vermont. And the interesting thing about Sarah is that she got into a motorcycle accident in Peru. Is that right?
There's a lot of interesting stories that I'll take over in Arizona.
In Arizona, which actually led her somehow to market research. And I'm sure she'll fill in the blanks this evening over a cocktail. We have Randy Addis, who is a Director of Insights at PepsiCo, responsible for the Starbucks partnership, among many, many other things. Randy's interesting fact, and it's actually, I have to confess, one that he and I actually share, is that he spent a night in jail in Montreal. And he and I completely separate offenses, I'm afraid. We weren't co-conspirators, nor was it recent. But if Shane or anyone else is heading north of the border, they want to tell the authorities on the way up. I'm not sure if they're still looking for you, Randy. I know I'm still on the wanted list. And we have Casey Ingle, who is the Director of Brands at Owens, Illinois. And before that, spent most of his career on the creative agency side. So it's really for Casey to give us a flavor for the creative agency reaction to some of what we've heard today. So big hand for the panel, really. Okay, so I was sort of thinking through how to run the panel, and I thought it was best to just address head-on the topic of the actual panel itself, which is copy testing, hitting the mark or completely missing expectations horribly. And in preparation for that, I thought, well, I'll sort of try that out on one of our panelists, and I'll keep the panelists completely nameless to protect the guilty and the innocent. And I said to the panelists, I said, if you had to rate on a scale of 1 to 10 the performance of copy testing for your organization, where 10 being is it's just fantastic, it's doing everything we need, 1 being it doesn't do anything that we need it to do at all, what would you say? And I got an answer that I wasn't expecting. The panelists looked at me, and there was this look of absolute contempt in their face. And they said, Alex, the fact that you, from Brainjuicer, are asking me on a traditional 1 to 10 scale what I think of copy testing just leaves me feeling absolute contempt. And I guess maybe the question should have been, how do you feel about copy testing, rather than rated on a complex scale of 1 to 10? But, by the by, I will sort of rephrase the question rather than put the panelists on the spot and ask them, based on everything they've heard this afternoon, do they feel that there are gaps in their organization, the needs of their organization for copy testing? And if so, what, among all the different things we've heard about communications testing this afternoon, has made them most hopeful? And we'll start with Edwin, just literally because he's the closest to me.
So when I think about how we do communication at ESPN, one of the things that I get to touch on are our brand image campaigns. So it's just one aspect of what we do, really looking at the brand and how people are connecting to it. But the other piece is that when you think about some of the other aspects of what we cover in the Insights group is is looking at the content that's available across our platforms. In that same respect, that's essentially copy testing as well. We're looking at evaluating how great the content is and connecting with our consumer base and really trying to understand that. And I think, seeing some of the presentations and actually the panel that was here earlier today was a really good precursor to what we're thinking about, because we have very specific campaigns that drive things like tune-in for specific live games, for our studio shows. But what's really hard to measure is things like, we're the world's biggest sports fan. And that's something that we really try to reiterate. We've learned through a lot of our research that we have this metaphorical relationship between being the sports agent versus the sports fan, and we're constantly trying to remind our fans through our brand campaigns that we are truly a sports fan just like them. So having opportunities to engage with fans in a more emotional way, in some of the ways that we were hearing today on this panel, or the previous panel, is something that we're looking to do. I think if we have opportunities for consumers to express themselves in a different way, because consumers are really smart, and I think if we can give them tools to make them articulate some of the things that they feel, especially when you talk about sports and passion, that's certainly a winning combination for us. So.
I come from a background that's probably more disciplined, CPG, classical, all stereotypes apply, and I'm now in a company that's grown really fast. It's been $5 billion very suddenly, and hasn't done a lot of the traditional really anything along the way because it was too busy growing. And one of the things that's interesting about that is I feel like we have a whole bunch of different ways that we engage with consumers that we don't even look at or measure right now. And so something that was interesting to me today was thinking about the new ways to sort of look at online copy and digital pieces. I've come from a background where I was doing marketing mix modeling after the fact to understand what was driving the business results. And, of course, that's still important, but looking at things live in real time is also really interesting and important to figure out. I have much to percolate on.
Coffee metaphor already. Ooh.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense that you got into market research after an accident, because who here in this room hasn't? So, yeah, I think I heard a lot of really interesting things today, and it makes me a bit hopeful. One of the things as you think about like this convergence of everything that's coming out of the cognitive behavioral sciences, neuroscience, etc., is that thinking of the metaphorical iceberg, where you only see the tip of it, and it's so little of what we do, say, and feel is something that we're conscious of, that really there's so much to mine below the surface. And actually, probably, to extend the metaphor even more, the water itself that the iceberg is floating in is probably emotion. So it's keeping, the thinking and feeling part of it, afloat, but still hidden to the consumer themselves and to us. And there's a forensic scientist, a forensic psychologist, I can't remember his name, but he had a great term or a phrase. He said, the mind, like nature, abhors a vacuum and will seek to fill in information even if it doesn't exist. And this guy is coming from a standpoint of all the flaws in testimony and eyewitness testimony. And in reality, I think we all face that. We ask consumers questions, we get answers. They're even able to come up with reasons why, but those reasons why might not even be accurate. It might not be really what's going on. And I think that's a really big problem for our industry. So I love hearing this notion of synthesis and synergistic ways of going after a problem. So you're coupling whatever rational probing you're doing with some other techniques, some really interesting techniques that are being validated, and there is convergence and a confluence in the sciences. Things like facial coding, things like the face's ability to convey an emotion, and that these are cross-cultural, these are fundamental, these are foundational. So the ability to start leveraging these things is really important. And just one last quick point, I think it was Anders who made the point, really important point, because we talk about copy testing, and we forget about the opportunity cost in the ad that wasn't there, the one that could have been so much better, but we're only evaluating those ads that we were able to come up with, either through the brief or through the insights that we've generated. But if you had that deeper connection to the consumer, the more fundamental, foundational insight, you probably can get to better creative briefs and better creative, where the copy testing is secondary there, right? I think it's still important that you're getting that part right, because you can get a false negative often, I think, with the copy testing that we currently have out there, which is mostly just question and answer, getting at that little 5 to 10% above the surface. Sorry for the rant.
So, hey guys, I'm Casey. I'll do a quick 30-second bit because I guarantee you have no idea who Owens, Illinois is. I didn't 14 months ago either. We're not Owens Corning, so no Pink Panther shit like that. Nor are we in Illinois, so don't blame me at all. I wasn't in charge of the name. We're actually a glass company. We make about 65% of the world's glass packaging. So the Perrier bottles, we make those. Jack Daniels, Miller Lite, pretty much anything you'll drink later tonight, you're welcome. Copy testing is interesting for us. We are a glass manufacturing company in a glass manufacturing industry that pretty much killed itself in the last 15 years by becoming a commodity. We allowed plastics to make what we offer a price game, and I came to this company to create a brand and create a movement to get people away from putting crap chemicals in your body and consuming food products and beverage products that are really freaking good out of a material that changes the way they taste. Randy actually is a customer of ours, and I would hate to see what his Starbucks loyalists would feel about drinking Starbucks coffee out of plastic. So when we talk about copy testing, we actually don't do any because we have a voice. It's my belief and our belief of our company that copy testing is a big crutch for brands without a voice. We know what we want to say, and we know the mission that we have, and we know that because we connect with humans. We have fundamental human truths about our business. Glass is healthy, glass is pure, glass is sustainable, and we don't really need to test that because those are truths. We know that people prefer glass every time, that they're limited by choice. So what we really try to do is to incite people to act and incite people to change, whether it's folks like Randy or your peers. When you're thinking about what packaging material to use, we want them to know the potential benefits, but frankly also the potential deficits they get outside of glass. And for consumers, we want to piss people off enough to write letters, because you can't go to the store and ask for milk and glass anymore, right? So we have to get people to go to the dairies. We have to get people to go to the retail partners and make the request. So we don't do copy testing. We have a pretty strong voice. What we really look for are ways to light fires and ways to create sparks.
Okay, so Casey, is my mic on, by the way? Everyone can hear me? Yep. So I think, Casey, what you're talking about essentially is that copy testing itself is asking the wrong questions, right? And therefore, for your organization at least, it's not a relevant tool at all. And what really struck me this afternoon was, there seems to be this consensus, in the industry now that emotions are important, right? I think we can all agree on that. Some people seem to think they're more important than other people. Some people still seem to think that rational is somewhat important. Obviously, at Brainjuice, we think emotion is really all that matters, and frankly, you could throw all of the other metrics out, and maybe then I could sell Casey some copy testing. But as an industry, we are very, very, very slow to change. We've been very slow to evolve, I think, from a traditional copy testing system into a system that to some extent lends itself to measuring system one emotion and all that fuzzy stuff, but still keeps intact all of our norms and all of our gold standards. So I think it would be quite interesting to, I mean, Randy, maybe you could talk a little bit about at Pepsi, the pace of change in terms of evolving, the way Pepsi thinks about the way that advertising works and the implications that's had for the way you think about, copy testing, but I think also research in general, really.
We have a very big initiative behind this. Obviously, we do a lot of advertising. I think one of the things that we're trying to ascertain as an organization is, the definition of communication. I think the topic here is, when you think communication, free association, everyone's probably thinking, creative copy, right? Probably TV on top of that. And we're really trying to understand this more holistically, and probably the biggest and most important piece of communication we do is our package itself. So, thank you. but also, all the other ways beyond the semiotics of glass and the bottle shape, the symbolism, the everything else that you say that's packed with meaning on a consumer-facing product, which they're interacting with a lot more, and you're guaranteed to get the eyeballs, at least if they see you at shelf and they buy you. So there's a reinforcing mechanism there. So I think copy in that sense, we're taking a step back and thinking more broadly. But in terms of what we're trying to do as an organization, because the creative isn't going away, and some of the old way of thinking isn't going away. It's still, there's a lot of sort of inertia behind doing things that used to work and hopefully still works. But we are doing something like I heard, I don't know if it was Rana or Rena, but she was saying that her company's doing with Unilever. We're pushing hard to bring more emotion into the copy testing, to dig below the surface any way we can, whether that is facial coding. I mean, one of the reasons why I'm so familiar with Brain Juicer is because of one of the ways that they've brought this in a scalable way into a quantitative tool, which is the facial that androgynous woman who just drives me up a wall, but is there to try and capture some emotion. We've done some research with that and have come to very different results. The problem is we haven't done it on a scale where we've been able to really sort of draw a conclusion from it. We've just done it on more one-off ad hoc ways.
So Edwin, Sarah, then, to build on what Randy's saying, I mean, it feels like we've reached the consensus, right? That the fuzzy emotional stuff is important, and Pepsi are recognizing the importance of that. Casey was always 10, 15 years ahead of everybody else, so he always knew the importance of it. Who's then at fault then for the pace of change, or the lack of pace of change in the industry, in terms of really adopting a new model for how communications work? Is it the agency side, in terms of too many disparate views in terms of what you heard this afternoon? Lots of different people telling you that different things are important, or do you think sort of corporate organizations such as your own are very, very difficult to engineer any change in, and therefore the pace of change is slow? I guess to put, who's at fault, who's to blame for the lack of pace of change?
You are, Alex.
apart from me.
I kind of think it's part of just that whole evolution of marketing research. For so long, we tried to build everything up to be a science and rational, and drive those wild horses of the emotion, hold the reins, and wise marketers knew that they were the ones who clued in that you have to look for the little letters next to the numbers, because those are the important numbers. And all of a sudden, there's sort of been this shift, and the people at the top of leadership now are sort of used to doing it a certain way. And I think there's always that key piece in advertising or in research where you have to know your audience. And I think we have some audience revolution that needs to happen, probably.
Okay.
I think probably everybody has a little bit of blame here. When we talk about communication, and Randy started to talk about the different definitions of communication. Obviously, there's specific ways we've just talked about, but then there's also new and emerging ways that we're able to connect to consumers. When you think about things like word of mouth, which are very powerful for a brand like ours, sports really is the ultimate water cooler. How do we quantify things like that? But then talking about word of mouth and social media, and kind of That's another interaction point. And I think the hard part for us as researchers is we have all these different connection points, and often we have partners that offer very specialized solutions, but we're left on the back end trying to triangulate those solutions. So if there's ways to kind of bring all these points together and call them, communication, it might be a little bit easier to advance the cause that we're talking about here.
Okay. I mean, it's incredibly interesting, I think, that, you guys are saying a very similar thing, actually, to what Casey said. For him, the communications testing is not as relevant because we're not sort of hitting traditional above-the-line communications. And I think, even traditional CPG, companies and models are moving beyond that sort of, traditional above-the-line, start thinking about lots and lots of touch points, with their various different brands. So I think, there's a ton of alignment among the panelists. I mean, one question, and anyone shout, what would you say to Casey to try to encourage him to conduct some copy testing for Owens, Illinois? My final question before I turn it over to the audience. Randy wants to take that.
Yeah, it's interesting because there are insights to be had that you could probably use to sell to your clients just about glass that go beyond everything that you talked about, and how the relationship of glass to childhood experiences, the feeling of the glass, that physiological feeling that starts an emotional chain reaction that happens that is again so far below the surface, consumers don't realize it, but there are things like that. The coldness of it, the impermeability perception of it relative to plastic, those kind of things. There are insights that we, on our side of it, as we did our work, plastic can be cheaper sometimes. We tried to see if we can make that move, and there were some things that made it harder for a high equity brand like Starbucks to go there. But so I think there's always ways to dig deeper. Absolutely everything that Casey talked about was fundamental to the relationship that we all and consumers especially have to glass products versus other alternatives.
Cool. Any other thoughts?
Can I give 2
Absolutely.
seconds? So we do research. I mean, we do talk to people. We do think. For us, Randy, everything you said is actually very true and very centric to us. I talked earlier about a commodity, and I spent the first 10 years, and I know we're late, but I think this might be kind of valuable if not throw something. I spent the first 10 years of my career on the agency side, and I watched myself as a strategic planning director try to sell research all the time to clients to make our recommendations more smart. We tended to bring IIeX or some other person with a British accent because that was really important at that point.
Plus really good looking as well, right?
Sarah, really good looking as well. Sarah talked about kind of the evolution of research, and I think having a Brit in the room was really important at one point in time. And then having insights was important, and now having social media is important. But for us in our situation, it's about having the right conversations with the right people. Randy, I wish that our business transacted with you and your peers. However, it does, and it's in procurement. And my challenge to the research folks in the room is to make sure that you keep the what and the why that you offer outside of a procurement conversation. And I know that's different advice and not what the panel's about, but glass killed itself by trying to outprice plastic. And I think there's a lot of folks in the room with great solution and great brands that are probably killing yourselves by trying to outprice someone next to you. We as an industry and we as a brand and the leading glass company are fighting that fight to get out of procurement, to have those levels of conversation we need to have with people like you, Randy, and because we know those things are true. But try telling that to someone that wants to get 3 cents out of a price plan. It's really tough. So.
Okay, so final sort of 10 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes. Going to turn it over to the audience. So everybody's either extremely eager for cocktails, or we're going to have some questions. So exactly, it's a prime. It's a prime. So any questions at all? Yep. Okay, one in the middle. Try and get you a mic ready quickly.
It's more of a thought than a question, but you were talking earlier about why resistance to change, and I was thinking a lot of my clients, some of the remuneration packages of their C-level marketing execs they're based on the results of the copy tests that they run. So in order for this to change to fuzzier metrics, that would need to change as well, and that's probably huge. Thoughts?
Not to really answer your thought, but just thinking about how to sell advertising in the C-suite, it's interesting because oftentimes there's a fair amount of turnover at the top, and so someone will come in and say, oh, I was used to using this company, and you use that company, and oh, I just can't comprehend. And it's interesting being more in the trenches. You sort of recognize that there's also that overlay of smart thinking that we talked about. You know, there's a lot that you can automate or test, but then there's real life experience that, you know, I've worked with a lot of different ad testing companies across time, and I think sometimes just having smart account teams who can sort of say, and now what, or the so what is really important too. And I think sometimes that gets lost. The real human part with advertising, you almost need experienced sort of Sherpas to help make sense of whatever numbers you're using, whether they reflect feelings or, you know, good rational decision making, whatever it is.
I mean, would the panel agree that communications testing is a little bit different from other types of research where, you know, maybe there is no right and wrong answer? You know, we're dealing with something inherently creative. Would you guys align on that?
I would, yeah, I do think it's different, and I don't know that I would be all that upset if copy testing went away altogether. I think, you know, an inherently creative idea is an innovative idea, and innovation is inherently very, very difficult to test. It's going to do bad for the wrong reasons, and there's plenty of case study examples out there of people who did something despite the bad research results, and it paid off, right? We need more of that courage. Yeah, not a, oh my God. I was explicitly told not to say anything about these things. Yeah, and I'll just leave with a quote, because I think your point also is really important about the inertia that does happen. Why is change hard? It's the CYA mentality, right? This is David Ogilvy, my favorite marketing research quote. Most companies use marketing research like a drunk uses a lamppost, more for support than illumination. And that is so true, and we have to be in the illumination business, not the support business.
I thought you were going to make a totally different joke about the lamppost. One thing I'll add that I think is interesting for us and what I've seen, I think the C-level folks have warmed up to the idea of risk. Not the pure definition of risk, because risk isn't always good, but you know, we used to look at copy testing for taking every doubt out of the system. And someone wanted to have their chart, right? Well, 82% of these people said they liked it, and that's why they did it. But when you start talking about innovation, especially in terms of communication, you know, to your point, Randy, you take that out. Innovation is inherently risk. And I think that's what's getting C-level folks fired up now. The possibility as opposed to the foolproof, you know, kind of bulletproof decision. So I think that's the bet too, and I think that those folks, especially with more CMOs playing in the innovation space, it's becoming more important to have strong intuition, not bulletproof data.
Okay. Any additional questions from the audience? I can see another raised hand. Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
A specific question for you about this risk and innovation and testing. You see a lot, you know, there's been a big movement in Silicon Valley called, you know, lean startup, designing a minimal viable product, putting out something to test, then measure, then learn, and go through that cycle. That's specifically about how to reduce risk instead of making big bets. And I'm curious, are any of you in your businesses trying to apply that kind of way about learning rather than making huge bets, but actually being very proactive to innovate and learn and move faster?
I'm going to go quick because I want to pass along. But one of the things that we're beginning to talk about is doing more experimenting and less research. The reason why, because in reality, closing the doors sometimes is as important as opening doors. You need to know what you're not going to pursue anymore, that path is the more fruitful path. And research, by its nature, is not definitive, and it's open to interpretation and cherry picking. And I think that's where it takes a fundamentally different approach, more of the scientific method approach, to being able to actually conclusively rule something out so that you can move on to the next thing.
I would just add, one of the things that we try to do every year is we kind of look back, usually in December, and say, what have we done this past year to fail courageously? It's one of the things that's sort of like our group mantra. You know, we think that we have a lot of hits and success over the course of a year, but we look at those things that failed and what can we learn from those failures. And that's really important to us. So.
I do like the idea of thinking about communications in terms of innovation. It's not a way I've heard it put before. Question?
I just wanted to ask, Randy made a comment about the role of the pack and it being one of the most important pieces of communication. How do you get to really good insight around packaging research? Do you guys do much packaging research at PepsiCo?
I mean, it differs. I think brand to brand, team to team. It's unlike some organizations, Pepsi is a little more entrepreneurial, so each team is able to sort of do it their own way, and there's other companies that are more prescriptive. But I mean, to me, it's getting to the emotion. It's getting to the importance and understanding of the role of semiotics and how things can communicate so far beyond the words that are said, and that they can complement each other so that the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. And I think it's just understanding that so that you're really understanding, like, are you not, and I think a lot of what we heard today about measuring emotion is part of that. Does it fit with what you're trying to say? Have you figured out what you're trying to say is first of all important, and then how do you say it even better than you could otherwise?
Any other builds from other panelists? Okay. Any more questions from the audience? I see one here.
Maybe this is cocktail hour discussion, but I'd love to hear a reconciliation of two things. One, Carolyn Winnett presented the results of the ARF study in her slides, showing that traditional survey methods and fMRI did a better job of predicting ad performance than EEG, eye tracking, galvanic skin response, heart rate. So that would seem to question this whole discussion about why we should ever do traditional copy testing. A second one is, how do you reconcile an AFLAC with the duck when originally developed did incredibly well in copy testing as an ad?
And there's clearly a judgment being made there. To me, the problem inherent in that people, whether it's understanding how to leverage metaphor or understanding how to read emotion and facial expression, and the meaning that can be there and the importance of that, I think is the way that you go from where we are now to some better place. But it's going to be an evolution. It's not going to be like we're going to go from here to there overnight. It's going to take a while, and it's going to take it's funny, as an industry, you'd think we'd be evolving a lot quicker than we are, right? But
what would you say is most important, Randy? Scalability or precision? Do you think it's a trade-off, or do you think you can have both?
I think the latter has to be there before the former is important, right? Like copy testing is scalable now, and it sucks.
Except with brain juice.
I think there's really a lot to be said for this idea of learn, build, prove, or build a little, sell a little, learn a lot. And probably as an industry, we'd all be well advised to adopt that mantra.
One thing that I'll add to that. So in the fall, we launched one of the first glass innovations in food ever. And none of you have probably heard about it yet because we took a blatantly different approach. As opposed to doing focus groups, copy testing, all that stuff, we actually found a local retail partner in Ohio. We created a marinara sauce. We created a private label brand for them. And we launched a product on their shelves. And we did it in our backyard. Largely because we didn't want a lot of people to know about it. The Perrysburg, Ohio doesn't elicit Huffington Post and Wall Street Journal articles very often. But we did it because we wanted to see if people would pay more for spaghetti sauce. If people would see a value in a glass jar that allowed you to cleanly pour and not get all the crud and crap stuck around the rim, and if we could add value to that. And what we found is that people like the big CPGs, like the big brands, were more interested in hearing how it performed on the shelf. How it took the average retail price up from $4 to $7.49, how it went from selling 12 units in the category to 42 units in the category a week, up to 242 units a week. That's the kind of stuff I think these business decision makers are looking for now, as opposed to 83% agree with my message and we really think it's strong. We chose to invest our research money and actually make money on the shelf with it to get a strong business case as opposed to research. I could be wrong. We were right this time, and I think we'll try it again. But Alex, to your point, and I think a little bit to your question, we had to be incredibly precise before we could scale. If we started with a lot of scale, no one would believe it. So we had to actually do the homework first and show our math, if you will, to get to the bigger conversation. And I understand every brand, every business has different models than us and different dynamics, but that's what works for us. And I think when we launch innovation going forward, we're going to go to shelf first. Frankly, Randy, we love innovating with folks like you guys, but we can innovate on our own, and I think that's what we're proving.
Okay. So I think we have time for one more question before I turn it over for closing remarks. So any more questions from the audience? Oh, back left. Yep.
So I kind of see it on the other side of what somebody over there mentioned, technology, trying to innovate, try to help you guys with your problems. And one of the challenges I face personally is how do we establish the conversation? How do we get the little guy trying to do something for you to talk to you and take a chance? Pointers, ideas, reaction.
Yeah, so don't just email me. That's weird. Sorry. No, I think that we as I think client decision makers, business brands, whatever you want to call us, I don't think we've ever been more open to the small guy, to the small idea. It's what drew me to Brain Juicer 7-8 years ago, was having something that I could start an argument with, having something that was so profoundly different that it actually provoked some kind of reassessment. And that's what I still love about Brain Juicer, but what I think I could fall in love with every other small guy out there for. Because what you do and how you think allows me as a decision maker to provoke a reassessment of what we're doing. So, I think figure out a way to tell your story, figure out a way to do so directly, not just a random email. I was joking earlier, but I think you have to do some level of spec work, and I know that sucks, and I know that's weird, but bring me an insight, bring me something that you proactively thought about my business and kind of had your own holy shit moment, because that's what I want to buy. And I know that's selfish, and I know that you need to be compensated for your work up front, but just give me a nugget, and I guarantee you that I'll be inspired enough to know more. That's going to do better than a cold call.
Or you could hire someone with a British accent. We did both. Randy, sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
Oh. I've seen those people who take a little bit of extra time just to think, even you don't have to solve my problem, but just maybe take a good crack at what you think my problem was, because it makes me much more likely to respond, oh no, that's not my problem, but this is. And then you've got the conversation going. Or show me an example of sort of how your tool works applied to my business. And I guarantee that gets my eyes to sort of pay attention in a much different way.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think actual case studies of how you've applied the thinking is certainly the way to connect with us. It's really important for us to kind of see you thinking about our business in a way that maybe we haven't thought about it yet. I think too often we get very, what's the word I want to use? Things that are not provocative enough about sports, like just things that are too common about sports. We really need something that's different in the way we're thinking about it. So,
okay. Great. Well, just to sum up then, before we turn it over for closing remarks, if the panel had to, just sum up the way they feel about the future of copy testing after this conversation and after everything they've heard this afternoon, with one emotion, what would that emotion be? Don't all jump at once, but since Edwin has the mic,
I would say bleak.
Skeptically hopeful? I'm not sure what the face is for that, Alex.
Yeah, a while back, it would have been like Grover Norquist talking about the government wanting to drown it in the bathtub. But no, I think, I mean, I heard a lot today, and I'm aware as well, because we are on this journey, at PepsiCo, but I think, I pay attention to the industry, and I think we're getting it. I think, one of the most, practical reasons why we have to do this, have to get better is, you know, I have competitors at Coke. They're pretty smart. Maybe smarter than me. I'm pretty sure they probably are. And they're doing the same exact things we are, and they may be doing things differently. So is it just an incremental game of getting a little bit better insight so that you're always just moving the needle this much, you know? Or are you going to get the game-changing insight that is going to allow you to develop the creative, the copy, that really connects to consumers and that is buzzworthy and that does generate the word of mouth and mouse and all those things? It's going to take that. So if the little guy has an idea that's better than what else is out there, not just a repackaging of you know, a flashier way of doing it, then I'm all ears. And there's going to be a lot of people in the industry now that will be all ears as well.
So we've gone from bleak to skeptically hopeful to, I think, distinctly optimistic. And Casey, you're going to make it better and better.
Dare I say surprise? Here I was, the antagonist. No, I think that I'm really interested, to be honest with you, because the bar for me is very low. And I know that there are people in this room that have amazing solutions that are better than anything we've thought of before. And I'm not just kind of placating to you guys. I think you have to do something better. You have to do something different, because at the end of the day, the way we make decisions is so profoundly different today than it was 8 years ago, 12 years ago, probably 3 years ago. So for all of you and for this industry to stay afloat, you're going to need to change. And that's why I have kind of that positive emotion about it, because I love that I'm in the middle of the war right now with all of you trying to figure it out. I don't think there's ever been a better time to be in this business. So.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. And I think that's it.